Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach. Today we're going to take a look at some of the SuperCoach traps. I had the must-haves, and as I always do, I have the blokes that are fairly popular, but I think we should be steering clear of. Did this one last year as well, with mixed success. Obviously it's difficult because these guys are clearly, popular for a reason, so they do have some reasons why people are interested. I could sit here all day and tell you a bunch of blokes who are traps that are in 2% of sides, but I think last year definitely got Paddy Ryder wrong. He certainly proved me badly wrong. Andy McGrath certainly scored better than I thought, but definitely got Jobe Watson right, Taranto right. Rob Murphy and Johannesson were quite popular at the time, and they were definitely traps, I felt. So, a few guys that, some you get right, some you get wrong, but I've got a handful of guys here that I'll work through. I've got them 5-1, but not necessarily are they a hardcore rank. But in at number 5, I've got Alan Christensen, 267k. He's in 20% of sides, and we've debated long and hard about him, I think. I mean, personally, I wanted to see more midfield time, a bit more ownership as more of a leader now in that Brisbane team. And from what I've seen through the JLT, basically it's been a bit of half-forward flank stuff, not great numbers. And look, Tom Bell, who's 20k more expensive in the same team, has come out and really churned out big numbers to put himself on the radar. So for me personally, I needed to see a fair bit more than what he's produced, because the fact is his body's a bit of a liability too. He's only put together 22 games once, and it was a really good season. He won the best and fairest. But otherwise, last year he didn't play a game. 2016, 11 games. 2015 was that 22-game season. 2014, just the 8 games. So historically, he misses games. He misses a lot of weeks. So when that's already on the table and that's already a fact, then I think we needed to see that the scoring potential was quite appealing, and we haven't really seen that. So for me, it's someone you've got to put a line through, and the risk is just too much when we're talking about the potential reward. So that's that for that one. And Tom Liberatore I've got in at number 4. He's in 10% of sides, and I tried to limit it to guys who are in at least 10% of sides, because that's a reasonable portion. And look, he's 434k. Clearly, he is working back to some of his best footy. He is looking much better. Probably got a bit of a kick in the arse after a couple of quiet seasons where maybe his professionalism wasn't what it quite could have been. But it's been a while since we've seen those big numbers. Obviously, in 2014, he averaged 110. Since then, he's done a knee, missed a year, and we've seen averages of, I think it was 90, and last year was about 79. Now, there's a few reasons as to why, but at 434k, in my opinion, you really need to be pumping out big numbers and really being a solid stepping stone. And I don't see him absolutely cemented in that midfield all the time. It seems to me that the Dogs like to have smalls in the forward line, that high-pressure game style. And he's part of that rotation in amongst, Dalhouse, Dunkley, Hunter. And there's quite a few guys that will roll through there and play a similar small forward role. So I think his numbers will go up, and I think he could potentially, be a handy draft selection, but far too risky for mine to be picking him in Classic. I think if you are looking for that sort of a range mid-pricer through the midfield, which I certainly don't like, I think if ever you're going to go a mid-pricer, it'd be between 300 and 400, 250 if they're really, on the cheaper side of things. But if you're going for this sort of price range, then just work your way up to Cornelio. I think he's a far better pick. From memory, he's about 18k more expensive, something like that. I'd be definitely opting for Cornelio because I think he's got much more upside and is more of an elite, classier player, in my opinion. Number 3, I've got David Armitage, and I'm pretty strong on this one. I mean, he's 16% of sides, 310k, and he's nearly 30, just 2 games last year. It really smells to me like a guy who is really on the decline. They've had a great career. He's been a very solid player for many years. Obviously had that great season where he really held that midfield and averaged about 109. But for me, it's got all the signs of a guy that his numbers are simply going back down. I know we find him a bit cheaper because of the injury, but he played okay through the JLT. You can't ignore that. But for me, I see him getting pushed more towards a half-forward flank and out of the real engine room. You've got the likes of Ross, Stephen, Dunstan, Nunes, Steele. I think there's a lot of guys ahead of him in that real stoppage contested situation at St Kilda. I think he'll still average respectable numbers. And I mean, I think he's a guy who's still got that mid-80s in him, but I don't think we should be expecting 90s, and I certainly don't think he's going to get back up to 100. I personally think probably an average of 90 might be the best you're going to get. But for me, that body issue is a massive concern. So he's the sort of guy that I think we've really got to question whether he's durable anymore. And for me, you guys know I don't like mid-prices through that midfield, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. I don't like having them in there, but I see him getting on in his career. He's had that first real genuine injury that's kept him out. And sometimes, like we've seen with Griffin, like we've seen with Deledio, you know, they go from guys who are quite consistent and durable, then they get that old-timer injury, and then they're never quite the same. And, you know, Armitage could be battling this for another year or so. We just don't know, and I don't think it's worth taking that risk. Even if he does play, I don't see him commanding as much time through the guts. So that's enough reasons for me. In at number 2 is Yogo O'Meara, and he's not far off the price of Armitage, $315k. I definitely see the upside with O'Meara. You know, we know he could be an absolute superstar. We know his talent. We know how exciting it is. But for me, he's in 25% of teams. He's played 6 games in 3 years. He was a fair bit of rage this time last year. He broke down. He let us down. And it could well happen again. You know, I think we always hope that the fairy tale comes true, but it could be a disaster. You know, this could be a nightmare. We might not ever see the best of O'Meara. And I don't want that question mark hanging over my head when I'm picking him in my side. So I think he's far too risky in my opinion. The positives are clear. He has an absolute role in that Hawthorn midfield. Talent to burn. If he gets the body right, then he could be a star. And it's still a could. You know, I've watched Daniel Menzel very closely being a Cats man, and I remember watching him as a youngster. I thought he'd be an absolute superstar. He's been cruelled by knee injuries. He's still a very good player, but he's lost a couple of weapons. He's lost a couple of things that made him such a promising youngster. He's still a very serviceable player, but he's never going to get to the heights that maybe we once hoped. And we hope that isn't the case for O'Meara, but it could be potentially what happens, that he loses a couple of those things, whether it's speed, whether it's a quick step that he once had as a youngster. And he still becomes a really good player, but they've got to become a slightly different player from the jet that we thought they'd once be. And that's my concern. Not only could I not trust his body in a million years, he's not as cheap as chips. You know, I think he was 318 last year, plays 6 games at 64, and he drops 3k. I know SuperCoach try and make it interesting and challenging, and I do like that. But it's not as though he's got any cheaper and any more appealing. So for me, it's a definite no. I think it's far too risky. Definitely better options if you wanted to take that punt. I think Cornelio's the best mid-price option. But for me, I'd definitely be going for a bit of a rookie. If you don't have Brayshaw, you know, someone like Davies Uniacke, you know, those type of guys, I definitely think of better options. Save you a bit of coin as well. But in at number 1 is Nick Natanui. It's pretty clear. He's 465k. He's still in 17% of sites. Now, we don't even know if he's going to play. At this point in time, we're not too sure. He may well. He may get up. But, gee, he's had a horror pre-season. He's been carrying this for so long, this injury that we thought would just, you know, maybe interrupt the front end of his pre-season, has carried on and lingered and given doubt until round 1. Well, that's certainly a concerning sign that he's obviously had a setback at some point in time. And again, is he going to be at his best? And surely he couldn't be. You know, I think he's a guy who needs to use his athleticism. He needs that jump. I think he needs to be firing on all cylinders, because he's not like he's an old contested warrior who's just going to get and handball out of the pack and the stoppage and, you know, then get the fitness and work in those other areas. His game style and his best scoring requires him being athletic and dynamic. And I'm not so sure we'll see it initially. I reckon we'll see it at some stage during the season. But to start with him would be extremely risky, because he's not that cheap either. 465, that's not like it's a bargain. If he's 350, then all of a sudden, you know, the scales are much more evenly balanced when we weigh up those pros and cons. But at the moment, I'm just thinking, he's not even that cheap, and the odds have been breaking down a high, and it's not as though he's a 110 guy when he's fit. I mean, he's more of your, at least what he's shown us, he's more of your 100 to 105. So I think in the ruck, it's far safer to just go your set and forget option. So that's what I'll be doing, and I strongly endorse you to do the same. So they're my 5 guys. A little shout out to Josh Caddy and Adam Sard as well. I think they're in about 7% of teams, and I'm not sure why the hype over those guys. I definitely think they're traps. They're not quite enough teams to maybe warrant me putting him in those handful of guys, but a couple of honourable mentions. So that's a bit of food for thought for you guys. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on them. A lot of people out there will have a couple of those guys in their sides, clearly, because they're quite popular. But that's how I see it. They're not in my team. I think they're very, very risky guys. I'm not saying it's impossible that they could be good picks, but I just think when you weigh it up, and that's what we do with every selection, you weigh up their pros and cons, risk versus reward, and make a call in comparison to their price and potential output, and that's where you stand. And I think these guys have really got a few people thinking and got a few people selecting, but I do fear that it could go quite pear-shaped all too quick for those who do select him. So that's just my opinion on a few of the guys that are SuperCoach Traps this season, and it pretty much brings our pre-season to an end as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed bringing you plenty of content. It's been the biggest pre-season Shorty SuperCoach has had. I think upward of 70 videos throughout the pre-season, and basically every one of them goes for at least 10 minutes. So it's been big. I've enjoyed it. I've loved the response too. I set out to have that goal of 1,000 and then recalculated it to 1,200 by round 1. And we're a day out and it's sitting on 1,250. So I really thank you guys for getting on board. It's fantastic to see. I'll, of course, unveil my team tomorrow. I anticipate that to be, be pretty tight towards the first bounce, around 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I am working, so I'll probably look to duck home, record it, and then upload it just maybe as I drive home or something like that in the passenger seat. But yeah, let's see how we go with that one. I'll probably just have to piece it together before I leave, and then let the old Wi-Fi do its magic. So anyway, I'll endeavour to have that up before the first bounce, and hopefully we can get a few rookies named. That'd be great. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you all soon. Cheers.